Hello, guys. Welcome to the Simple is the New Smart podcast. I'm Zara Fagan, the author of Minimalist Homeschooling and your host today. It's the beginning of a new year. This is the first time I'm back to podcasting in 2024. So I thought I would talk today, just chat a little bit about my reflections on this idea of minimalism. And, a lot of times I wonder whether I should rewrite the book under a different name because it's been out for 6 years now. Um, it'll be 7 years this July. And sometimes minimalism gives people the wrong idea, right? It seems like a very dogmatic approach. And a lot of times people ask, can I see an example of your schedule? Can I see what your schoolroom looks like? And they want to know what other people are doing. And I don't like that minimalism has become like another way to keep up with the Joneses, right? So now instead of comparing ourselves, in the consumerist lifestyle to neighbors that may have all the luxurious things, now we're comparing ourselves to other homeschoolers who tout themselves as being simple or minimalist. And we're still comparing ourselves. Like it's still a losing game. And so the idea about minimalism that really appealed to me is this idea of filling your life with exactly what you need and love, right? It's creating a lifestyle, engineering a life that you can love and that you can embrace and in which you and your family can thrive, right? So the goal is not to own as little as possible. The goal is not to do as little as possible in your homeschool. And the goal is not to use as few books as possible or own the fewest number of books, right? There isn't a competition and there isn't meant to be a comparison. And I worry that within the name minimalism, just that name, minimalist, minimal, minimalism, you immediately get people feeling like there's a standard that they have to uphold. And the whole concept behind minimalism is to get away from the standards that society imposes, right? And the whole point of homeschooling is to sort of step away from the standard that public schools impose on our children's and our family, on our children, excuse me, and our family. So I have to remember that today I am podcasting both on video for the Zara PhD YouTube channel, as well as audio for whatever podcast platform you love most for the Simple as the New Smart podcast. And so you'll find that there are going to be a lot more ums. There might be me correcting my speech because I start to talk really quickly and then I realize that I said something wrong. So it's a little more unfiltered now, guys. So you get the authentic me. I don't really love that phrase, but you get the idea. So anyways, I was having this sort of inner turmoil about this concept of minimalism and what I'm promoting online, and that I'm sort of held up as some example to a subset of homeschoolers of what it's like to do it right. And I really want to spend today talking about how this is a journey and I don't think I get it all right. I know I don't get it all right. And I know that I still have a lot of progress to make. I know that I still have books that I want to use, but haven't used. I have a lot of want to read books, guys. And I know that it is a constant intentionality. And so the question I would pose to you, and maybe you can leave a comment if you're watching this on YouTube, is what word is better than minimalism when we're talking about this sort of intentionality? So the goal is not to have as little as possible. Listen to the whole podcast. Tell me at the end, what word do you think it is, right? Because the goal isn't to have as little as possible. The goal is to create a functional and fulfilling homeschool in our case, because I'm talking to homeschoolers, but you can insert a functional and fulfilling schedule, a functional and fulfilling space, right? One that cultivates exactly the life that you're choosing, right? So the idea here also is that when you say minimalism, a lot of people think that that's synonymous with decluttering and purging. And it isn't necessarily, right? So you don't have to adopt a minimalist mindset. You do not have to declutter anything today. You would just start choosing the best things, right now, like right from this minute, you would choose the best things to do with your time. You would choose the best things to use as ingredients for your next recipe. You would choose the best things to do with your children right now, today, right? So educationally, if you went to your supplies, if you went to your bookshelf and you wanted to do the best thing that you could choose with your children in this moment, what would you choose, right? And so it's no longer following a lesson plan. It's no longer, sort of having this prescription or this checklist. We instinctively know what we want for our children. We know what we want for our families. We know what we want for our lifestyle, for our culture. And so how do we give ourselves permission then to just choose the best thing in every moment? And the more you do that, and this is sort of how my journey to minimalism started, was how do I just do the best thing with the limited time that we have available? And I like to say that a lot. I made a meme, maybe I should post it again over and over and over again. The question is never, how do we get it all done? The question is, how do we do the best with the limited time that we have available? And I would argue the limited time that we have right now. Right. And so in minimalism, in your space, it's going to be, how do we make the best of this limited space we have available? And when we're talking about our time, it's how do we make the best of the time we have available? And the issue here then with homeschooling is not so much about how do we make the best of all the curriculum. Now we have to refine down to which curriculum is going to be the best use of our time. Right. And so it's not about the stuff at all. With minimalist homeschooling, it's much more about your time, right? And so decluttering and purging often seems like the goal in minimalism. I think, like I said, people think it's synonymous with minimalism, but that's a tool, right? So decluttering and purging is simply a tool to make your life more intentional in order to live the way you want to live, in order to homeschool the way you want to homeschool. And so you may not have to declutter or purge anything. And so the idea of minimalism may be a turnoff simply because you don't want to declutter. Maybe you like being surrounded by all the books. Maybe they bring you comfort, and maybe they do create a lifestyle that you want in your home where you have lifelong learners. Right. I have a huge bookshelf at home because I want my kids. It's right next to a gigantic sofa. I want my children to pick up a book and sit down and get cozy. There's no television in that room, right? It has big windows overlooking our backyard, lots of books, and lots of comfy sofa seating, right? And that's the life I want to cultivate. Could I put a smaller sofa in there? Absolutely. Would it suit us as well? No. Could I own fewer books? Absolutely. But do I want my new reader picking up the baby board book and giggling over it and being happy because she hasn't read it in years, but it was one of her favorites? Like, yes, I want that. I want that comfort, and I want that level of comfort with books. So we have a lot of books, right? And in your home, it may not be the same. And so this idea of using minimalism as the new prescription, the new sense of control. And that's the other thing I honestly have to be conscientious of, is that a lot of times when we want to declutter or purge, we're using it as a tool to get some control over our life. We feel like everything's out of control, or it's a complete mess. It's a complete disaster. We don't know which way is up. We're frazzled all the time. We're distracted. We're too busy. Da, 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 da. So we just want to simplify our space so that some of the mental clutter can leave and we regain a sense of control. And that's absolutely valid, to get control over our space. The problem is with any good thing, when it goes towards being sort of dysfunctional, in that now we're obsessed with control. Right? And it's become a new prescription and a new thing that we have to get control of, or else we're failing. So therein lies the other problem with this ideal of minimalism, is that if we have a prescription, if we have to keep up with the Joneses, then there is a very good likelihood that we will be failing, at least part, if not most of the time, because the target is always moving, right? We can always start prescribing to ourselves. This is the beauty of like our compulsion for self-improvement, is that we move the target on ourselves, right? We say, well, I purged 10%. Now, wouldn't it be better if I purged even 10% more? And minimalism and purging and decluttering and simplifying it is a lifestyle. You never arrive. It's a journey. But when it's a prescription, you feel like you are supposed to arrive somewhere, right? You are supposed to have accomplished or achieved whatever it is that someone else prescribed, or that this image you have in your mind of where you want to be. And so I think I'm struggling with this whole concept of minimalism being somewhat like defeating and difficult for a lot of people, simply because society has turned it into what it turns everything into: a competition, a comparison, something to achieve, something to do, as opposed to a mindset, a lifestyle, a mentality. And I think that it's a lot easier to go through life doing the best we can with each moment instead of feeling like we have to arrive somewhere. So, overall, therefore, my version of minimalism starts with knowing what our goals are, trying very hard to avoid that moving target, right? So in our homeschool, you could always add more, right? I say this all the time. There is always going to be more you could do, can do, should do, would do, ought to do, right? Would have done, did do in the past with another child, even, right? And the issue here is that if you don't know exactly what your goals are, you're always going to feel like you're missing out, right? There's going to be this FOMO, fear of missing out. And when you know what your goals are for that specific child at this specific moment, it becomes a lot easier to accomplish that and to feel successful. Right. So our goal is never to have a certain number of books on the shelf, but our goal is to create a lifestyle, it's to create an atmosphere, and it's to know what is the best use of our homeschool in this moment. Right. So going back to the very beginning, where it's about being functional and fulfilling now. And you don't have to purge anything now. You just have to get intentional with your moments. And purging is our tool for lifestyle design. Our stuff then serves our goals. Do not ask, do not do the Marie Kondo thing and ask, does it spark joy? Because you are a homeschooler. Yes, yes, it does spark joy. That's how you got all the stuff that you don't use to begin with, right? So that's not a good question. I'm going to do a podcast next about different questions to ask yourself if you're struggling to let go of things. But I will say that a lot of times people acquire things or search for things as a tool for distraction or procrastination, or to try to make themselves feel better because they're not clear about their goals. So not only is this FOMO driving us searching for things, but it's our own self-doubt and our uncertainty. And we're looking for some sort of reassurance out there that, aha, this is the perfect thing I should be doing with my child. Or maybe teaching your child a particular subject is really, really difficult. That happens. It happens to all of us. It happens with all children. If I'm wrong and you have a child who has never had difficulty learning something, drop me a comment, tell me I'm wrong. But in my experience, I have never met anyone who hasn't had at least something that their child struggled with, right? And so a lot of people will look to the stuff to solve the problem. Well, maybe I'm using the wrong things. And it becomes sort of this procrastination or a delegation to the stuff, instead of just sort of diving in and just sort of being there for our children and getting through it with them. And, a lot of times we can't blame the curriculum, and we can't blame ourselves, and we can't blame our children, right? And again, our society tells us, well, something must be at fault if it's hard. No, maybe nothing is wrong just because it's hard. Maybe it's just hard, and this is a growing moment and a learning moment, right? And we are not meant to go through life and it should be easy. So maybe it's not the curriculum's fault that it's hard. It's definitely not your fault it's hard. It's definitely not the child's fault that it's hard. I'm not saying don't look for other resources, but I'm just saying don't spend so much time looking for other resources as the solution, because I think that sometimes we do that. We acquire things and we keep hoarding things as a distraction or procrastination from the hard things, from the decisions we don't want to make, from the subjects we don't want to teach. Maybe we're not motivated, right? Maybe our child's not motivated and we're trying to find the right thing to get them motivated. And so, it's more of a heart issue. It's not a stuff issue. It's not the curriculum, right? And so the other problem with hoarding all the things or feeling like you have to purge all the things, I mean, it goes both ways, guys, is there's a cost to your well-being, right? It's not just a financial cost. There's absolutely a financial cost in homeschooling, depending on the decisions you make or the decisions you can't make. So you buy all the things, right? But if you keep it on your shelf, you are telling yourself that you're reminding yourself on a regular basis that you aren't doing all the things. There's a well-being cost to that, right? So there's this idea that yes, we're being successful and yes, we're doing the best with our time. But yet if we have those reminders on the shelf that, oh, there are all these other things that not only do I feel guilty because I spent my money on them, but they're sitting there reminding me that I could be doing more. We could do more. And we as human beings want to avoid shame. We want to avoid guilt. And so there's this intense pressure then to use the things, right? And so, and again, I'm going to get into this in another podcast about, the story that we tell ourselves about these things. But purging, decluttering, again, becomes this tool for mental well-being, right? To reassure ourselves that we do have plenty so that we're not living in this constant state of scarcity or desperation to find the right thing and use the right thing. If we can get confident that, yes, this is the best thing for me to use in this moment right now, that has so much impact on how we feel, how we approach the day, how our children feel about homeschooling, that they can know what to expect, that they know exactly what's going on. And it's going to be incredibly hard to declutter if you're carrying the guilt, if you're carrying the shame of having bought the thing that doesn't work, right? Or the shame of buying it and never getting around to it because you just didn't have time. So I'd like to say you didn't have time for those things because you were doing better things with your time. There's no shame in that. If we are constantly being intentional with our time and saying, what's the best thing to do right now? And we're doing those things most of the time. Okay. All of us veg out and are not productive during certain parts of the day. And I would argue that that is productive, that we do need to rest in order to be productive, but I'll get to that maybe in a different podcast. But my point is that if we're doing the best, even if that's rest with every moment, then the fact is that you weren't willing to give up your rest for that thing. You weren't willing to give up the other things that you do with your kids for that thing. You weren't willing to give up chore time, making dinner, taking them to their activities, reading that read aloud, studying that subject, meeting with friends, going to the co-op. You weren't willing to give up the field trip, any of those things for that resource. So therefore, that resource is necessarily less valuable. And if it's not, then you really have to ask yourself, why didn't you prioritize it? Right? And maybe it's because you just don't like the format and you found it in a different format, right? So I think that this idea of keeping on to things, holding on to things because we feel a sense of shame that we haven't gotten around to it is really damaging to us as homeschoolers, and it's really unnecessary because really what it symbolizes is that we were busier doing more important things. It's not that this important thing didn't get done because we're complete slackers and we're failing, which is the story that every homeschooler seems to want to tell themselves, that they're somehow failing their children. It's because it wasn't the most valuable option at that moment. And if I'm wrong, and if it's on your shelf and it really is super valuable, then prioritize it today. And like I said, you don't have to declutter a certain thing, anything, really, anything at all. Just pick up the most important thing and start doing it now, right? So that's really what I have for today. I know that it's kind of rambling. I wonder if minimalist homeschooling would be better called intentional homeschooling, which, is kind of vague. I do have a homeschooling with intention 5-day challenge that's super helpful. Um, and I do use the word intentionality a lot. I picked up the word minimalism when I started this because the definition of minimalism is having just enough of what you need and love so that you can focus on what's most important. And I think that that is a huge concept in homeschooling. We can have just enough of what we need and love so that we can focus on the most important things in our children's education, and we get to decide what's most important. And that's sort of the crux of the whole book, is to walk you through, what's most important? How do we fit that into a day? How do we choose our resources? And so, from that regard, I think that minimalism is the perfect word. But I do think that it comes with all this baggage now. You know, I think it comes with all these expectations, and I hesitate to put pictures of how we do things. I hesitate to do any podcasts about how I teach or what we fill our days with or how busy I am. Guys, I'm a very busy person. And I've alluded to this in other podcasts, but the concept that I go with is you decide where you want variety in your life. So our homeschooling is pretty routinized, right? For me, it's pretty streamlined. I do crafts, and I do field trips and fun things with my kids. My younger two are in like an enrichment type co-op. So 12 times in the year, they meet with kids their age, and the parents lead classes, and it's very enrichment. It's baking things, making things, drama, those sorts of things. And so we have that sort of variety going on, but what's going on in our home is very routinized, right? So I do have a plan of which subjects we're studying, which day, with which children. I have 4 kids, and I teach math to all 4 of them. I enjoy math. I like math. My oldest is currently a sophomore in high school. So I teach them each math every day. I teach history to my older 2 together. I take them to Japanese lessons. We go to the Japanese teacher's house 3 times a week. We do a lot of activities. My kids are all involved in sports, and we try not to limit their sports. I have an oldest in Civil Air Patrol. I have one on a gymnastics team. I have one on a travel baseball team. I have one on basketball teams. I have another one who likes trying out all the different things, right? So right now she's into dance and hip hop, maybe indoor soccer. I have one, my oldest, in addition to Civil Air Patrol, he plays rec league volleyball, he plays rec league indoor soccer. We are super busy. That's the variety I like. I don't necessarily choose variety in our dinner plan. Our dinner, lunch, breakfast, it's routinized. It is the same thing every Monday. Every Monday. It's the same thing every Tuesday. It's the same thing every Wednesday. And that's because I can't do all the activities and all the teaching that I want to do if I'm worried about being creative in the kitchen or what's for dinner, right? I can't do anything for my business. I can't do these podcasts. And a lot of times I step away from podcasting because it's not the most important thing. I'm sorry, I don't mean to offend anyone, but if you've noticed, I will go months without podcasting. I think it's been about a month now since my last podcast. And that's just a signal to you that I'm doing other important things, and that this isn't the most important thing going on in my life right now. And I'm okay with that. And I hope that instead of frustrating people like, oh, why doesn't her podcast come out every 2 weeks like she intended? I'm hoping instead to set an example that it's okay. It's okay for something that is valuable to you. I enjoy podcasting. I hope, I pray that it's valuable to other people, but it's okay to let it go for a couple weeks. And it's okay to choose other things. And the same is true for your homeschool. It is okay to let something go for a month. It's okay to choose other things. It's okay to not have variety in every aspect of your life. Like everything can't be rainbows and butterflies, or else nothing is rainbows and butterflies, right? So if we don't have these consistent routinized days, my kids will not get excited about pajama days reading all day on the sofa. But because we have this sort of routine, anything out of the ordinary then is exciting, right? Whereas if we just read every day on the sofa, that would cease to be exciting to them, right? And so that's one way that I sort of console myself or justify or perceive, interpret, whatever words you want to use here. This is how I look at my homeschool and whether or not I need to be this glorious teacher like the ones that I see on Instagram who do all the creative things. And my answer to that, my rationale looks a lot like what I just told you, which is no, I don't have to do all the glorious things all the time. But then when I do something like we do the craft, then it's exciting. My kids are really happy about it, right? I know for a fact with my older two, I wanted to do crafts all the time because I was that overly ambitious teacher. And I will tell you from experience, my kids were like, ugh, not another craft, right? And that's how I ended up with a makerspace, where I just gave them the materials and they, in their free time, they could make whatever they wanted, because I actually gave up on these sort of assignments that were craft based because my children didn't actually want to do what I prescribed for them to do for crafts. They weren't excited about it. It wasn't helping them learn anything new. And so crafts were a lot better for them and creative for them and provided a better opportunity for them when they were open-ended. And so I think that what I'm really trying to do with minimalist homeschooling is give everyone permission to make those observations and do what is best for their children and for their families. And to not say you have to streamline your schedule like I do. You have to spend hours in the car every day running kids around to their different activities like I do. You don't. You definitely don't. And maybe your kids do want you to lead them in crafts every day, in which case that's the best thing to do with your time, and you should do it, because this is all about engineering a life that you love. And so with that, welcome to 2024. I'm so happy you're here with me. I will try to podcast more regularly. I have all these ideas in my head. If there's something you want me to podcast about, please go to the Minimalist Homeschooling with Zara PhD page. Find me, Zara PhD, on Instagram, comment on this YouTube video, or if you're in Spotify, you can leave me a comment there on the podcast. Tell me what you want me to talk about this year. I'm pretty excited. Our year is crazy. I am feeling a little bit braver about talking about what we're doing now with our kids versus how it looked even 5 years ago, which is totally different. And, it's going to be a good year, guys. I can feel it. 2024 is going to be a great year. I am wishing you all the simple things. And I hope today you turn this off and just go choose the best thing to do right now. I'll see you soon. Bye-bye.